Good afternoon and welcome to Rewind, the show where we look back at the game industry's past as we build the game industry's future. My name is Chris Melissinos and I'm the Principal Evangelist for the video games industry here at AWS and your host of Rewind, coming to you live every Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. Now make sure you hit the like, follow, and subscribe buttons on Twitch and YouTube so you know when we go live, and it really helps the channel out. Now in today's episode of Rewind, I sit down with Christopher Totten, who is the program coordinator of the animation game design program at Kent State University and an award-winning independent game designer, artist, and animator, and all-around awesome guy. He holds a master's degree in architecture with a concentration in digital media from the Catholic University of America. Chris is a co-founder of the Smithsonian American Art Museum Arcade. Of course, that gets a bit of an air horn right there. And a lifetime member of the International Game Developers Association. He was a member of the inaugural class for the Indiecade Horizons Faculty Excellence Awards, winning the Innovation Award for his work building an appreciation for games in the context of the arts. He is the author of An Architectural Approach to Level Design and Game Character Creation in Blender and Unity, and the editor of the collected volume Level Design, Processes and Experiences. So let's welcome Chris Totten to the program. Yay, Chris, yay, welcome. Thank you so much for spending time with us on this Friday afternoon on Rewind. It is awesome to see you, buddy.
Awesome to see you as well. Always a pleasure.
Likewise, we've got this very rowdy audience. It's going to take them a moment to settle down there. But yeah, I'm thrilled to talk to you. We have so much to talk about today with the incredible expansive work that you've done over your career, not just as as a professor and academic in teaching game development, but the type of games you've developed, the lectures that you've given at GDC, the work that you've done overall in the games industry, work at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. A ton of stuff, but I would also be remiss if I didn't point out we have the Pie for Breakfast Studios logo and URL right there. So make sure after this program you go ahead and check out Chris's work at pbfstudios.com. We're also going to go ahead and take a trip through his website today on the program. So Chris, once again, thanks, buddy. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. This is really exciting.
Awesome. So now, look, just for you, I wore the Art of Video Games t-shirt.
I noticed that. I was like,
what I
still have that mug on my desk at work.
Oh, see, very nice. And what I will also point out is that this is really green, but because of the magic of green screen technology, it is now purple, like the rest of my background for this episode.
It's really cool
today.
As purple. They should bring that one back.
I think so too. I think so too.
Colors.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump in and let's talk about your background in the games industry. So what I really want to talk about, before all the academic work, all the game design work, what's the first video game system you had? Like, what's the one that really stuck out in your head that you remember?
The first one I had was, I was really little, like when that transition era between like NES and Atari happened. So I remember asking for Atari, because like a bunch of kids in my neighborhood had Atari, and my parents were like, "No, we'll just buy you a Nintendo." Now I have both.
Fancy.
Hooray!
Fancy. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the first one I had was an NES.
All right.
And like that was a huge. And we're gonna touch on some of this, like based on conversations we've had prepping for this. Playing NES was not just like an individual thing. It was like the whole neighborhood. Like, different houses down the block had Nintendo. So you'd go over to somebody's house for Zelda, somebody's house for Battletoads, somebody's house for Mario, based on who had what. And it was this like really awesome, like communal thing. playing those games together and like learning how to beat them with, like who had the Nintendo Power subscription and things like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and that it was a communal thing because we didn't have digital distribution. You couldn't afford to get all those games when we were growing up in that era of Atari and early cartridge-based games. You got them for your birthday, you got them for a holiday, you got them for your graduation from elementary school to middle school, right? Like, and
Right.
you got one. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I don't know if you were like me, but you'd also coordinate with your friends like, oh, you should ask for this game and I'll ask for this one. Then we can swap them. Right.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And what I love about the two in this, the thought experiment that I love to walk people through too, is we talk about video games. You talk about your NES. I don't know if I ever actually posed this line of questioning to you. So we'll try it out here and see if it works. So you remember getting the NES. You had the packing game, of course, with it, right? Which was probably Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers, right?
Yes.
Okay. Where was the NES in your house? Do you remember?
So the NES was in our family room, which was wood paneled and still is. My
Nice.
parents are going to renovate that room and get rid of the wood paneling, which I'm very sad about. But I suppose it's probably time to get rid of wood paneling. But I remember us having one of those big console TVs that was like a piece of furniture.
Right.
And so we would sit on the ground in front of the console TV, and somebody would have the issue of Nintendo Power out, and the other person would be playing. We'd start off a game like Mario 3, both playing, but, I remember like my friend Mike across the street, he would always come over, and I was a few years younger than him, so I would die like real quick because I was really little.
Right.
And he'd just keep going. There was a time like he just made it through the whole game. But when we did that, I actually still have it like in a box like right next to me, the Super Mario Brothers 3 strategy guide, and I would like co-pilot with the strategy guide on my lap while he played. We'd get to one of the card matching ones. Oh, which one did you get in the upper left-hand corner? Oh, you got the fire flower. Let's look at the guide and see which one it's going to be, and stock up on items and stuff.
Okay.
But,
Okay. Good.
yeah. Sorry.
No. That's good. No. So here's what I wanted to ask you is, with your friend Mike over there with you, do you remember where you sat? Was he typically on your left or your right? Like, can you remember, like, if you were sitting there with that book, where was he?
I think the time that he beat Mario 3, I think he was to my right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And so that NES was probably pulled out onto the floor in front of you. Not sitting on top. Okay. All right. Now tell me all the same detail you remember when you encounter your favorite book or album or movie. Where were you? What did the room look like? Who was sitting next to you? How were you sitting? What were you looking at? Where were the things placed in the room?
Man. I don't think I can.
Right. And so the and I love that you answered it that way. I've had every once in a while you'll get somebody that goes, oh no, I remember getting like this one really important book, or remember the Pink Floyd The Wall album, that I got. But most of it's because it's more, as you pointed out when we started, it's more than just the video games. It is the entire experience of play. And because these video games sit, in this parallel world that we can't be in, or couldn't at that time, but we could affect, meant that everything about your environment is going into the input that you then play, basically brought into the game, and then you would see it react and you kind of absorb that back out of here. So it's more than just the game. It is the environment in which you played, the smells, the sounds, the people around you in this shared experience of an alternate universe. And I really believe that as we learn more about how video games are going to be used to teach and for medicine and for all these sorts of things, right? That is such an intrinsic part of it. The games don't stand apart as a medium. It is a collective of your existence that they're being imbued with. And I think that's super awesome.
Yeah, they're kind of like multi-sensory. And I was actually doing some writing like right before coming on the show. Like a lot of my work is kind of about that, really. It's like I think with game academia in the last like 15 years or so, there is a school of that where they're really thinking a lot about like, games in a media studies way, where it's like, let's look at the affordances of this one type of medium according to its own terms. But I really think like games need to be considered in the broader cultural landscape. I'm not the only one that says that. I'm not the first to say that, but like that's kind of how I think of approaching games, for that very reason, where it is like, it's this whole experience. And we can pull in so many other experiences when we describe them. Like, what's the music like? How is the music work? How does the level design work? My background with architecture really lends itself to thinking about like, well, why is this level appealing? What spatial principles make a level memorable or seem like a place, as opposed to just like a course to like an obstacle course.
Right.
What makes you get connected to something like, I've been playing Tears of the Kingdom, and
I know, incredible, right?
And that Hyrule, especially since it's one that we got in another game, feels so dear to me now, because not only I've been there multiple times, but also like just the time you spend with that place. Nintendo did a really good job of making it feel like a world with a character and like, again, a sense of place. And I keep saying place, but I'm using that really in a architectural sense. That is a term people use to describe a certain sort of like real seeming location.
Yeah, there is a solidity to the world that's palpable, right? That it feels like a place that could exist somewhere. And in the back of your brain, it's like, I may have visited this before, because even though the way it is displayed to me and the way I'm engaged in it now may be different than when I first encountered that maze layout, those spaces. The familiarity, the underpinnings of it are there, but now I'm experiencing a completely different way. And I think that fits very well with the limitations of the platform after almost 10 years, right, of existence, right, from an architectural standpoint, not the amount of time that's been in market. And what they've done with it is just extraordinary. But we're going to park that because we have a lot to talk about Nintendo, but I want to talk about you. So you first started on NES, and then tell us how you got into video game in academia. Like, how did you what led you through your life to kind of start down that road of teaching about video games and game design?
So in college, a buddy of mine, my friend Jim, we were both on the swim team together, and he was in computer science, I was in architecture, and he said, hey, art programs, I know how to code, let's make video games together. Famous last words. And so we did, and we made one thing. It was a terrible Tetris clone. I actually found it last week, so I might need to boot that up at some point and try it out. But we made that, and that was around the time that like a lot of books on game design, but from like an academic perspective, were coming out, and I found those. That is actually a book that I do distinctly remember getting. Actually, going back to the things like, do you remember getting certain things?
You're gonna pick that apart. You're gonna pick that apart all weekend. Actually,
I totally will. But it was at a Borders, and it was like in the game design section, so I was doing 3D modeling in architecture school, and I was interested in like, how do I do this for video games? I found this book, Rules of Play by Eric Zimmerman and Katie Salen Tekenbas, and I just read through it, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a book that talks about games, this medium that I grew up enjoying as like entertainment. It's describing it in the way that my architecture textbooks are describing buildings, right? And design.
Yeah.
And it helps that like, that book in particular also really does dive into some like architectural topics and how it discusses games too. So that became like a thing. I remember in another architecture studio class, we had to come up with like a concept for a building, and the concept I came up with was not very good. And my friend Carla, shout out to Carla for this. She goes, you know, you've been reading a lot about game design. Why don't you make your design about game design, what you've learned? And it's like, you know, that was it, right? So then that turned into like doing my grad school thesis on game design and architecture and all this other stuff. And so, you know, that's where it became like kind of an academic interest of mine.
Yeah.
You know, I got out of grad school when nobody was building any buildings.
Where did you do your graduate work?
At the Catholic University of America.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why I was in DC. I live in Ohio. I'm from Ohio, but I went to school in DC and lived there for years and years.
Because you also worked at another university here in the DC area. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But...
Yeah, I worked at quite a few of them actually. But the nobody was building anything, and I got some digital media consulting in because I had that 3D modeling skill, and I got into game academia because I got a job teaching 3D art classes at a game design school. It was like one of those for-profit ones, something about tightening up graphics.
On
but
level
it got
3,
me
yeah.
On level 3,
level
yeah.
3 because I got another game I need you to make with your PlayStation 2 controller.
Right, exactly. But that, you know, that like got me my start, and it gave me the time to start getting into indie dev and honing my skills, becoming better, and getting to the point where I could really actually, you know, do things in the industry. So that's, you know, and then I worked from like university to university. I went to George Mason, went to American University.
You went to George Mason University. Oh, that's a fantastic institution, by the way. not that that's my alma mater or anything, but yes, fantastic institution. Well, you were teaching game design, and so, but then it was more than just teaching. You were also putting what you were teaching into practice for yourself and getting involved in other projects across the game sphere. One of the things that you and I have in common is doing work with the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And you have been actually part and founded and been part of this program they've been doing now for a decade. For 10 years, they've been doing this, right? And it was the Sam Arcade. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Oh, next year will be 10 years.
Year 10. This is year 9.
Right.
Next year is year 10. So that was that was actually through IGDA when I was chair of our IGDA chapter back in 2014 in DC. And one of our members, Francis, I want to make sure like I give like credit and name call the right people. He was volunteering. He volunteered at Smithsonian American Art during the Art of Video Games.
Yeah, but let me pause you. We should give a huge shout out to Francis. He is awesome, and if we'll give him. There's some applause there, a little bit of the air horn. Yay, Francis! Because you can also see him at a bunch of different conventions. He cosplays as Wario. He's an amazing Wario cosplayer. He has the most wicked mustache and braided beard, and just one of the kindest, nicest people you could ever want to meet in this space. And I completely appreciated his, volunteering at the Art of Video Games exhibition for the time it was there.
So, yeah, he was like, well, they're looking to do more video game events. This is like in 2014. And could I get you in touch with my contact at Smithsonian? So he got me in touch with Kaylin, and she and I got together and started hashing out what could they do. And I was like, we've got this indie community of indie developers, and we really want some place local to show that it's not like we have to get on a plane and like go to California to try to like show off our indie games and things like that. We want to be able to do some stuff locally. Could we have like an indie game festival? And they were like, that sounds great. So we partnered with MagFest to get some like retro arcade games and consoles, and ran a competition for the local indie dev scene. Kind of like it started with DC and then kind of grew out to Baltimore and the Philly scene a little bit, like mid-Atlantic groups. And we did like a sort of semi-local showing the first year, and it went really well. So they kept doing it, and it grew into quite an event. Now they're doing it where every year has a theme too, and it usually corresponds with something going along in the museum's collection, which is a really exciting development, because before it was like, well, let's get people in the door, right? And that's one of the things with these events is like they get people in the door. I think I remember during your event, they set a ticket sellout record during the Hideo Kojima talk.
Yeah.
The previous record was 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it was 2 minutes for Hideo Kojima.
Yeah. I did receive a call from somebody at the museum going, okay, that was not involved this, but then saying, who is Hideo Kojima and how did they sell out the entire auditorium faster than any guest we can remember having, right?
Yeah, I was at that talk. I was one of the lucky people that got tickets, and it was fantastic.
Thank you.
But so, it went from like kind of how can we... It went from this sort of recognition that this is popular, while still wanting to make it artful. Obviously, they were always trying to make it artful, to really starting to become part of like the museum's long-term association of different types of media. Like I remember being at Sam Arcade in 2019, and they had an exhibition on this one artist's depiction of like scenes in American mythology and history. In like miniatures. He made miniatures of like things like the Oregon Trail and Western Expansion and stuff like that. But in the Oregon Trail one, it said the influence of the Oregon Trail in American culture and American popular culture. And wouldn't you know it, right there on the display case was a screenshot of the Oregon Trail video game, the 1984 edition. And during Sam Arcade, they had a Mac or an Apple II on display with the Oregon Trail game and a little placard next to it saying, go see this in the collection. So then you started seeing this crossover between the collection itself and the exhibitions and Sam Arcade. So it's really become like just part of the museum's broader like ecosystem and I don't vibe.
Right.
Thing? I don't know.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, and I think that was really one of the wonderful things about when we did the Art of Video Games there. I remember one of the articles was just like, I think more people have experienced more art at the museum because they had to wait like 2.5 hours in line inside the museum. And so they're experiencing all of this art that they never would have really been exposed to because they may not have understood it or knew where to look. And one of my favorites is like Namjoon Paik, right? Like the Paik stuff, all of the video art that was done from like the 60s, like it's so tied to it's the element of the it is the elemental component through which this medium is displayed. So the association together is just fantastic, right?
I'm really glad you brought up the Namjoon Paik connection, because so Sam Arcade's date, which is like now this year it literally is July 22nd, but it's usually end of July, early August. It was chosen because that's his birthday. So there's that
awesome
element of it. Yeah, so it's still kind of tied to it. But the other thing that was really funny about it is that so there was this exhibition near me a few years ago called Video Games or Open World Video Games and Contemporary Art. And it was this absolutely at the Akron Art Museum, and it was absolutely like innovative, incredible exhibition. I wish more people have heard about it, but now they will, hopefully. So go check that out.
Definitely.
And incredible exhibition. I don't know if it's still touring. It was for a while, but Akron Art Museum also has a Nyenjunpeik, and I'm like, well, clearly, and we did an arcade for them associated with the exhibition. I was like, well, clearly this is like one of the conditions of, you know, if you're going to do one of these, you have to have some Nyenjunpeik in your collection.
Yeah, exactly. Life is always better with a little bit of peik, right? So
yes.
So, all right. So, look, I mean, we should schedule like a 3-hour talk because there's so much in your background, your history, the stuff that you've gone ahead and led, the talks that you've given at GDC. How many years at GDC now have you been presenting?
Have I been presenting? I think my first talk was 2017.
Okay.
I've been going since 2012. And I still do the conference associate program, which is amazing. GDC Conference Associates, neon shirts, folks that help people get around GDC and whatnot. Shout out to them.
Absolutely. We'll go ahead and little Donkey Kong jump for our colleagues there.
It's really a wonderful thing. I've met so many amazing people and lifelong friends through that program. But the so I've been presenting since about 2017. Different areas, level design, teaching. Did an indie talk on public domain stuff a while back. So
I'm going to embarrass you by saying that the times that I've seen you speak, packed audiences. I mean, like consistently. And that's just, that really speaks to how you're viewed in the indie scene, how you're viewed in academia, because it's not just, one of the problems that we can have with academia and games is it can become too academic. It can be, it can lose some of the kind of intrinsic kind of emotional and human elements to it when it's constantly dissected down and trying to tease apart what it is. And it is truly a case where the sum is greater than its parts, right? Is what video games are about. Your approach is always to peel back that layer to understand how it's constructed, but then why it holds such meaning, why it has that impact, how people react to that. And that comes across not just in the talks that you've given, but also in the work that you've done as a game designer, which we're going to go ahead and dig into. So, Chris, awesome work in academia, in teaching next generation of game developers and continuing to impart your knowledge back to the community, going ahead and driving really important works like the Sam Arcade, which continues to elevate and broaden the exposure of video games to popular audience and bring in new kind of institutions into the fold. So thank you, buddy, for doing all of that. And now what I want to do is jump on over and let's go ahead and explore some of your work right now. Alrighty, so here we are on Chris's website. Like I said, you can go ahead and head on over again after this to pfbstudios.com. Pie for Breakfast. Now, I don't know how you came with the name of it, but I will tell you in our house where Pie for Breakfast comes into play was on a show called iCarly, right?
Okay.
Which was a Nickelodeon show. And my kids growing up watching iCarly and their older brother Spencer said to one of the characters, "Don't say pie for breakfast, say pie for breakfast." So I always thought that was great. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it can't be named after that. But every time I see it, that is what I'm going to send you the clip. Pie for breakfast. Oh man,
that's amazing. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah. You got to get the use of that audio clip as the audio bug for your game. So when your logo pops up, you just hear Spencer scream, "Pie for breakfast." That would be great.
Oh man.
I'll find it for you.
I used a version of GB Studio to make Kudzu that doesn't allow for sampling like that.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll figure something out. We could do a little animation there. So pie for breakfast. Where did you come up with the name? Just because it's cool to have pie for breakfast?
I mean, I actually like, what was it? When I was at Westwood, I would do these like summer game labs for our students where we'd like come up with a project and like try to make something. And we were working on something together, and we were just like brainstorming ideas. And one of the students goes like, "Oh yeah, what about pie for breakfast?" And I was like, "Oh, that's it." That's like a really cool. So shout out to Julian for that. Great guy. But yeah, so I was like, "Oh, okay," and we're gonna incorporate this and like make it a business and things like that. So that's where it came from.
For the good of games,
it's still like
and your belly.
Me at this point, yeah. What?
I said pie for breakfast for the good of games and your belly. That's what pie for breakfast is. All right. So let's talk about some of the work you did. So you've had several games that you've done in the past: Zup and Litsky's Revenge, La Mancha, which is a card game, physical card game. Now, did you kickstart that? Is that how you
did?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So La Mancha was that's another book I remember getting. Was I remember getting my copy of Don Quixote. But I was reading Don Quixote and I was like, man, I really love this book. And I was being a game designer. I was like, wow, I wish I could like make a game about Don Quixote and like kind of explore this world in that way that one does when they like make a game about something. But, primarily as a video game designer, I was like, scope is a thing. And this is an 800 some page, like a pillar of Western literature.
That's right.
So it would seem like kind of like contrite to make like a game where you jousted like a mini game where you jousted windmills or something.
Right.
But then a buddy of mine in my board game group at the time, Ian, he was like, hey, why don't we make prototypes of games and bring them to board game day sometime? Because he wanted to like get into game design. I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. I'm gonna make the Don Quixote card game. So it's kind of like metagame Cards Against Humanity-ish, except you are responding to prompts from the novel Don Quixote with blurbs from books of chivalry and Don Quixote itself. So you're like creating stories out of these like lines from books of chivalry.
So look, when you said it wouldn't be good to just make a game where you're attacking windmills, although the folks over, I think it's Restoration Games, just announced a new Kickstarter. They did Dark Tower, which was amazing, and they also did Fireball Island, which was amazing. They're doing crossbows and catapults, which I was like, oh my gosh, there you go. There's the La Mancha. That's a free suggestion for you right there. The La Mancha expansion pack, where instead of just castles, you've got giant windmills that you have to go ahead and attack. It'd be great. Now, with the reason I found out, about the work and got to experience it a bit was I ran into you at GDC right before the pandemic hit, and you were handing out very specific cards that I haven't, as we said, I was trying to find it before the show, but I have it in my storage room. It is the Chris Crawford card. Can you tell us real quickly, and then we're going to jump into the other games that you're doing. What was the Chris Crawford card?
Chris Crawford is a well-known game designer who was working in like the early days of the industry, and the first GDC was in his living room, but in 1992 he famously gave a speech called the Dragon Speech, where he professed that the game industry was growing in a way that he was not entirely comfortable with, and he wanted to go on his own path. And it's a magnificent speech. People should go check it out on YouTube.
Absolutely.
I believe he actually uploaded like a remastered version of it in the last few years. But he, in the speech, he kind of role plays as Don Quixote, and takes on this character and thinks of the game industry as like a sort of dragon, or not the game industry itself, but like the idea of games as a artful medium.
Yes.
And which is amazing though, because when we've kind of been through this whole process of that becoming a thing in different ways. So it became this, the game came out in like 2019. So it was this weirdly timely way to revisit this. So the card, I emailed Chris Crawford and asked for his permission to do this. He said, yes, sure. And so I made this card, and then like we would go to GDC and like play La Mancha with people doing like giving their own dragon speeches, and it was quite something to watch. People give their own dragon speeches and express their thoughts on like the size of the game industry and the economics of the game industry and the artfulness of the game's medium and things like that. It's really cool.
Yeah. No, it really is, and I won't spoil the ending for you. Make sure you all go ahead and check out that video by Chris Crawford, and I'll go ahead and make sure that we put a link in the description of this broadcast after we wrap up here. So, all right, so you've done multiple games. You've done this card game, which also won the 2018 International Serious Play Awards bronze medal winner. So congratulations, buddy. That's awesome.
Thank you.
But then you decided to go ahead and stretch yourself even thinner and decide to work on two separate games of two different types in two different mediums at the same time. Like, do you not have enough going on?
So there was that pandemic, and
that's right.
We all went a little stir crazy.
Yes, we did.
My 9-year-old daughter Adeline, actually said to me, "Daddy, why are you making two video games at once?" And I was like, "Wow, she's 9 and she knows that this was a bad idea." So both are games I actually have wanted to make for many years. So you brought up Kudzu there.
Yep.
Kudzu actually originates from when I was in architecture school. We had, as a bunch of kids from like up north, going to school, like not in the South because we were in DC, but like adjacent to the South and like the near Virginia. My class and it was a bunch of kids from like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, things like that. So we didn't know what Kudzu was. We had this
which I told you before the show, like I remember the comic strip Kudzu,
right?
That's all I knew about it.
Yeah. So we were our site had this field of what we thought was really cool ivy on it, and we had to like build little houses on it. So we all thought, like, let's make our designs about this plant that we thought was neat and this field that we thought was really unique. And I, at the final presentation for this project, our external person we were presenting to for our class was the assistant dean of the school. And so I got to go first. I gave my whole spiel. He goes, Chris, that's not ivy. That's kudzu. It's an invasive plant that it grows about a foot a night. It covers all the plants around it, choking off their sunlight and killing them. So I have to ask you, because you feature this in your design, is murder important to you? And I was like junior in college me, like
that. Oh,
like
sorry.
Looking at my
that's when you look at him,
and my teacher goes, "Hey,
yeah,
we didn't know that."
Right, but see, that's when you should just looked at him and said, "Run, coward." Right.
So yeah, he's like, "We didn't know that," and because everybody in the group had it. I had just like a porch that extended into it. Other people like made hedge mazes out of it, right?
Wow.
And they're like white as sheets. And so he goes, everybody in the whole project made their own designs out of this thing. So can we just pretend it's the Ivy? And the assistant dean goes, I'm still friends with both of them, by the way.
Yeah.
The professor and the assistant dean, he goes, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm telling this story to my wife years later, and she's from Virginia, and she tells me about her brother Max, who's the protagonist of the game, fighting off vines in their backyard with a machete. And we're like, hey, let's make a video game about Max.
All right. So as we do that, let's go ahead and actually take a look. I have a copy of Kudzu here. Look at that, everybody. How about that? Kids, are you excited? Yay! Everybody's excited about playing this. So while I start going through it, why don't you go ahead and talk to us a bit about the game design and Max?
So the game. Sorry.
You're good.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're perfectly fine. I'm gonna go ahead and start to play through. Is someone at the door? So it's very much familiar.
Somebody is at the door. I have to go dad for a second. I'll be right back.
That is your job. No problem, buddy. You go ahead and do that. So here we go. It's a very very familiar top-down look here. So Max, thank goodness you're already awake. It's Master Zoan. Let's see. It was my turn to bring him his tea, and I'm all out. He'll be super cranky. Yes, he will. Can you please make some and take it to him? Of course. Congratulations, you went ahead and did it. Made a cup of tea. Now we have to take it over to the house. So, moving over here, let's see. You're right, I can't just hang around here. That's right, get out and get some research done, buddy. All right, so now...
I'm back.
Hey!
So, yeah, the way that the game came about is, I mentioned, we kind of thought about making a game. We brainstormed a bunch of ideas. It turned into a design document. And this was like 10 years ago. But then it was one of those things where it's like, oh, this scope would be huge. I would need like a whole team to make this. So it just kind of sat as a design document for a while. And then I found a few years ago this engine called GB Studio, which makes Game Boy games with a no-code interface, because my training is mainly as a designer, as an artist. And I can script decently well, but I'm not enough to make a game like this in something like Unity or something like that.
Sure.
I usually work with trained programmers. And so when I found this engine, it kind of had everything I needed, and I was like, I'm gonna make Kudzu, and I'm gonna make it look like Link's Awakening.
Yeah.
And it's kind of Metroid-ish, Link's Awakening-ish. So it looks like Link's Awakening, plays more like a Metroidvania. It's just not a platformer. But it's been a lot of fun to make this because, there's an element of I'm not trying to recreate people's childhoods, because I don't want it to I don't want to just make something so Zelda-like that it seems like a Zelda knockoff.
Right.
But there's like little references, because I've joked my whole career, but I feel like a lot of game designers must be like this. My whole career is like a quest to impress my inner 9-year-old.
Yes, I get that.
So,
no, I completely get that, for sure.
So yeah, this one was it was a lot of fun to work on, both because I could play around with these design ideas from games I really loved as a kid, but also see, how can I challenge myself to make spaces that flowed together in quite this way. I'd done a ton of level design, but a whole Metroidvania world, getting that to flow in certain ways, that required a lot of planning, a lot of stuff that, again, I'd done in smaller ways on the kind of projects I've worked in, but this is okay, let's figure out how to make this big continuous space that kind of all works together.
I also realized I'm already failing.
Like,
I didn't bring Zoan his tea yet, so, and that tea's gonna be cold. Now I'm gonna get yelled at. Oh, Chris. Sorry, go ahead.
Just having it where it's a puzzle unlocks and you have to go back to another area to get to the puzzle, and then making backtracking not a chore and stuff like that. That was a lot of fun really dig into.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, what makes it so approachable, it's a design we're familiar with, and we've grown up with with this type of experience. We kind of know what to expect going in, and that's great because it kind of lessens the curve for people that are coming to the story for the first time, right?
And you know, I feel like in the academic space and in the indie space, there's this desire to always like think in, you know, you must have some new mechanic people have never heard of.
Right.
And I don't think that's everybody needs to hold themselves to that. Like obviously it's great to come up with new mechanics nobody's ever heard of. That's why we get amazing games like, you know, Portal, right?
Yeah.
You know, like when it came out. You know, Johann Sebastian Joust. You know, all of these
that's a good one.
That kind of took everybody by surprise. But there is something okay with like starting from a known game language, but then like, you know, then through the game surprising people in some way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm sorry, excuse me. So now you are imparting a bit of knowledge about this murder plant.
Right.
I live.
Oh, maybe that is the good.
Working in DC for so many years, like a lot of my game industry experience is in what's called serious games, which is like educational training, stuff like that. And it's gotten to the point where like I can't help it. Even in like a game that I make just to be like, oh, I'm gonna make a Zelda like on the weekends. I'm like, oh, gotta have educational facts about invasive plants. So
something that one of the Smithsonian museums would appreciate as well, right? Is imparting some of this factual knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now look, everybody, you just learned that kudzu is not a vine. It is a plant that overgrows everything else. It was introduced to the United States in 1876, and now you won't forget that. And it was originally sold to shade porters, but became so difficult to control. So there you go. And that's the kind of stuff you can absorb through games. Playing through games, too, helps you to go ahead and retain that stuff easily because it was introduced to you in an entertaining and unexpected way, right? The vine that ate the South.
To bring up a game from earlier in the stream, you know, the Oregon Trail. Like I learned tons about the Oregon Trail because it was in the computer lab when I was in middle school.
I had done a TEDx talk, my goodness, this is probably 8 years ago, something like that. And I was going through kind of the chronology of games and saying, all right, you know, let's start at the beginning, you know, here's Pac-Man and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, and the Oregon Trail, and you died of what? And the whole audience yells, dysentery, and everyone starts laughing. You're like, yeah, everybody, even if you didn't know what dysentery was, you knew it's something that's going to kill your family if you didn't get...
Right. And I remember watching like a mini series on TV once that was like, you know, about the West and there being like an Oregon Trail episode and you see things like they'd make scenes out of like fording the river and stuff and you'd be like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, don't ford the river. Find the crossing.
That's right. Exactly. It's going to sweep you away. And then all your horses couldn't swim. That was terrible.
Oh yeah, no, like somebody died in that. Yeah. Like one of the characters died, and you're like,
All right, so you built this game, and so this runs on stock Game Boy hardware, right? So there you go. Look at that, everybody. That's awesome. Yep. Oh yeah, I'll have to go ahead and make sure that I get in to get one of those. And it's great, but you also allow people to go and play the demo on itch.io. So they can go ahead and experience the beginning of the game, right?
Physical copies are also available for pre-order right now on Kickstarter.
All right.
Through my publisher, Megacat Studios.
Very good. Very good. And there are links to that, I'm assuming, also on the Pie for Breakfast website, right?
I can send you so that I can get, so that we can people watching can get this easier, I can also send you the link.
Yeah, just send me the link, and I'll go ahead and drop that into the show's description after we wrap up here. So here we are in the Kudzu field. So yeah, again, all right. So here's what I want to ask you. So now, the tool that you were using to create this game was
GB Studio. Okay.
What did you find most surprising about using that tool, and what did you find most what obstacle did the tool present that you had to kind of figure creative ways around, right? Using a tool set like this to do a commercial type of game, was there a limitation that was unexpected? So tell us what was really good and what was something that you had to overcome.
So there weren't limitations that were unexpected, mostly because they were Game Boy. But that was also like it's simultaneously, the pleasant surprise, but also the limitation, because the limitation is you are subject to the limitations of Game Boy. But because you're doing Game Boy through a intermediary middleware solution, like GB Studio, it's not this. I'm not doing it in assembly language where I can get down to the metal and like get everything out of it. I'm limited in how many sprites I can have on the screen. I can't, or what color or what shades of gray I can use in certain assets, and I can't really get around that because it is that no-code middleware engine.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that scope, those simplicity, that like focused my design such that I had to really work within the boundaries of that middle thing. I had to work within the boundaries of that middleware and the device. And so things that like could have easily, insert Kudzu joke here, overgrown,
right.
they're the scope of the project. Really actually like were kind of kept manageable.
Yeah.
And I could make a whole video game, with it.
And also, I love the fact that we have a student loan joke in here once again. The Gorfian laugh at that. So yeah, really awesome. So we're going to make sure that there's a link to where you can go ahead and actually pre-order a physical copy of this, and where you can go and experience the world of Kudzu for yourself. So this is really awesome. All right, I want to make sure that we move on to talk about another game that you're working on as well, so which takes a completely different graphical approach and completely different style of game. So we're going to go ahead and jump on over there right now. All right, so we're moving from the limitations, the palette limitations, sprite limitations, beautiful limitations that you work art within on the Game Boy, to full desktop games like Little Nemo and the Nightmare Fiends. So maybe start off by telling us, for those that may not know the background of Little Nemo, right? So why the property? Tell us about the game.
Little Nemo in Slumberland is a newspaper comic strip from 1905, created by Winsor McCay, who is one of the fathers of American animation. He created works that would have inspired Walt Disney, Maurice Sendak, Art Spiegelman, Mobius, lots of people who very influential in comics and animation. And he's sort of like the linchpin creatively of he's doing stuff in 1905 and 1914 that others wouldn't catch up to for decades. Like he's doing things with his animation. He made a cartoon called Gertie the Dinosaur in 1914. And some of the animation techniques that he used in that wouldn't be done until like the Disney animators 20 years later, who also then consequently like had grown up seeing Gertie in the theater. So really important figure in American media and pop culture and animation. And this Little Nemo comic is sort of his like comics masterpiece. It's this series of Sunday whole page panels. They look like stained glass windows. They feature these imaginative characters and settings, and gorgeous backgrounds, gorgeous perspectival artwork. I remember, and people may be familiar with, there is an NES game made in 1992 that was based on a movie that was created in the late 80s, called Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland. The game is called Little Nemo the Dream Master. And I remember I rediscovered the comic because I remember another one of those things you remember. I, for some reason, remember explicitly the day I rented Little Nemo the Dream Master from the Giant Eagle grocery store rental place near my house.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I got this game, cool Capcom games, great NES game, and I remember looking it up like in college and being like, "Oh, what was that Little Nemo game? Oh, let me find some stuff about that." And I looked up Little Nemo and I saw the comics. And as an architecture student, I was like, oh, "Gosh, this is gorgeous!
Incredible!"
These architectural vistas in it were incredible. Right. And I could go and do hours on the architectural inspirations of Little Nemo, but I don't have that much time.
Yeah. So what I was going to say too, the art style it invokes for me are things like A Trip to the Moon, the same type of art style like that, and then also more modern, obviously, than when Little Nemo was first created. But Harold and the Purple Crayon, right? Mm-hmm. That same type of kid in the onesies, pajama on these grand adventures, and I used to love the Harold and Purple Crayon stories when I was a kid as well.
And it's funny though, because there's a comic strip. The reason that there's a giant moon in our game is because there's a Nemo comic like that, and that would have been like just 3 years after that. So it's McKay actually making a pop culture reference.
That's very cool.
And then incorporating the Man in the Moon, and then Harold and the Purple Crayon. I need to look that one up, the connections, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that sort of meta kid in pajamas and meta fiction.
Yeah, where the wild things are, Maurice Sendak, right? Like, same, right. Kid in the pajamas, King Max, right?
Maurice Sendak actually made some of those characters like Nemo. Like, those are explicitly like Nemo. He wrote the foreword of McKay's biography from the 1980s.
I didn't know that. All right, while you continue to talk about it, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and start playing a little bit. So people can experience
came out
this.
About because Little Nemo's in the public domain, and this is another like Kudzu where I was like, I'd love to make a game about Little Nemo in Slumberland, and I so again made a design document probably around 10 years ago.
Real quick, I know the audio is going to be a little loud. I've got the audio down as low as I possibly can on the game in the demo, so we're going to speak up just a hair to make sure that that your voice comes in over it. So
I see I can do that because I'm a teacher.
That's right.
So we started doing. I design documented it and sat in my drive for years and years. And a friend of mine at GDC, another conference associate, Ben Cole, he and I were talking about games that we'd love to make someday. And I said, what I wanted to do forever is a game based on Little Nemo and Slumberland. And I'd want it to look like the comic, like you're playing the comic. I'd want it to animate like the comic, or not, well, like hand-drawn
animation.
Yeah, really lush animation, these lush backgrounds, things like that. And of course you hit a bug, because that's always what happens when when we stream games.
There we go. I'm going to shut the music off, which unfortunately it's beautiful, but I want to hear you talk about it. So we've got some sound effects through it.
So I mentioned like Little Nemo's in public domain, and Ben goes, "Really?" It's like, "Let's do it." So we get another friend of ours, Adrian Sandoval, and we just embarked on this epic adventure to create the Little Nemo in Slumberland game that looks like Winsor McKay's conception of Little Nemo. Because like I love Little Nemo the Dream Master. It's a great NES game. There's actually more Winsor McKay in it than I remembered when I went back to revisited it. Yeah, like there's some settings, but you know, within the boundaries of the NES. But you know, it's also not fully incorporating some of the stuff from these comics. So that's kind of where we really wanted to play around with. And what is going on in your copy of Nemo? That is interesting.
That's okay. Oh, you know what? I am now flying underneath this, but that's okay, and I'll tell you why.
That is amazing.
I will tell you why.
That is not supposed to happen.
See, everybody, you're experiencing the first bug, right? That I found there, but that's okay. We're gonna go back out here, and I'm gonna go ahead and hit start on the controller. I'm gonna start the demo again.
Oh man. I promise it doesn't do that. But you know, the thing with Little Nemo and the Nightmare Fiends is, and that's what it's called. It's called Little Nemo and the Nightmare Fiends. Is we really wanted to incorporate this world of we wanted to give modern game players, and going back to that incorporation of video game in the arts, we wanted people to be able to experience Little Nemo in Slumberland as it was originally conceived, with characters that one would see in Little Nemo, in the old school Little Nemo, but you know, through a modern way of enjoying it, like a video game. So you get to explore the different worlds of Slumberland. You get to meet different characters. You get to be different characters. You should swap to the Princess of Slumberland.
Yep.
You know, we get to, and we also get to, like, you know, the thing about enjoying works from 1905 is that they were made in the social norms of 1905 that are not necessarily, we're not necessarily okay then. We're not okay then, but are really not okay now. So we wanted to make something that we thought would, you know, allow modern audiences to be able to really enjoy, but also address some of these negative aspects of McKay's Slumberland.
What I'd like to point out here too, so you know, gamers have become familiar with this type of a throwback art style in games like Cuphead, right? Which really went back to that early animation days. And so not only do I love the fact that you're, you know, kind of pulling back into the same era, but the way that your team has created, like the texture in the background. Before we got on the program today, I was talking about the fact that it reminded me of almost like linen paper that the background is drawn on. The animations here of these platforms, right, rather than it being you know, the typical wobbling of the bricks and then falling, you know, those characters are actually losing their strength and you can see them tiring from it. And then you have, you know, kind of the build animation until you can step on it. Just really whimsical, just, and as you were talking about, you know, what people would expect from this may be animating what was kind of in your mind's eye when you experienced these works. So now you are basically bringing to life or bringing into the world the things that people had in their heads, which is awesome.
It's funny because we are pretty sure that we are the first animators since McKay himself, because he did one Little Nemo film. You know, he did, that was his first animation, was a Little Nemo animation. It doesn't really have a plot. It's just kind of like him making things move, right? But it's incredibly smooth and gorgeous. But that's just kind of what he's working with. He's just trying to make it move. And but there are characters in it that we're pretty sure we are the first to animate them since McKay himself. There's a dragon that's going to be like our save point / quick save mechanism, or a quick travel mechanism. We haven't seen that dragon in any other Nemo animations. Not the, you know, he's not in the movie. He's not in the TMS movie from the 80s. He's kind of So we're like, I think we're the first ones to do Bosco. And same thing with like, some of McKay's other characters have never been animated. So there's a little bit of like kind of art history, archaeology going on here too. But we have the benefit of this hindsight. So we can say,
Right.
well, what if Windsor McKay's characters, but um, using Disney's 12 principles of animation, what would that be like if he had those? What would it be like if um he saw the work of artists inspired by him, like Mobius, the French comic book artist, or Hayao Miyazaki. There's like some Miyazaki throwbacks in there and things like that. So we've really tried to, like you said, create animate things that gamers take for granted, like rising and falling platforms. We have one where there's challenges that are just moving platforms, but the challenge really is, and when you die, Nemo wakes up and the newspaper tears and he falls out of bed.
Yeah, because it isn't a dream.
Yeah. But there's things like, and in the final version of the game, you're actually going to be able to choose to go back to Nemo's house, and explore his house too. So you can choose not to go back to the dream. You can choose to wake up and then have a midnight snack, buff your stats a little bit, and then go back to sleep.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. So how long has the game been in development for?
We've been going fully at it for about 2 years now. We kickstarted it. Also award-winning. It won Best Digital Game at Meaningful Play last fall. And has won like Best Art, Best in Show at a few shows local to us. And we have it in consideration for some other events coming up. So yeah, we've been really getting it out there and trying to help, let folks know about it, and things like that. That area that you're in is if you use Nemo, he should be able to glide.
Yeah, it should be a little bit easier to navigate through.
Yeah,
we're going to give one more shot.
For the demo, we normally, this stage is, we call it our Mega Man X opening, because it is our sort of like, here's just a straight action stage to get you like into the vibe of the game.
Right.
So it's actually just going to be Nemo, but because we wanted people to be able to play with multiple characters during the demo, because the whole gameplay shtick, besides the nice artwork, is that it's a Metroidvania style platformer, but instead of one character that's buffed with different abilities, you are a traveling party of multiple characters, each with their own combat and movement capabilities. And those characters can be swapped between at any time. So you could start setting up combos. So there's a character that can climb walls. You can jump off of a wall with her, switch to Nemo or the princess, and gain extra airtime, and start to really see how that can turn into like speedrun strats, just exploration stuff, things like that. And once, we've seen people, once they figure that out, they like really are like, wow, this is kind of cool. They start doing wild stuff, where they don't make ground contact for a while, and
that's exactly what game developers are supposed to do, right? Is break those systems. Chris, the game looks absolutely incredible. Again, my apologies. When do you think? What is the timeline for release on Nemo? What is your current plans right now?
So we have a public demo going up for Steam Next Fest Monday.
Yeah, make sure you check that out.
And that's going to include this level and another level, which is our Mushroom Forest level, and which we've been working on all week. And we're trying to get some stuff out by the end of the year. Some content out by the end of the year that folks can get and download and enjoy. So yeah, we hope folks look forward to that.
Fantastic. Chris, really incredible job. Can't wait to go ahead and play through the full game. This is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for walking us through those games. Can't wait to go and play through Kudzu. Can't wait to go ahead and continue to see the progress on Little Nemo. Looks absolutely it's just incredible. I can't wait for people to get their hands on it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, no, the team's been working really hard. We've had one of the cool things has been like using my students have been able to help out with some of these through our internship program at the university. And it's been really rewarding to be able to like not only make something like this and make something that calls back to these, connections between games and the arts and comics and animation, but also to be able to like give people some of their first opportunities in the industry. They've really done stellar work. Everybody is really put in 150, 200%.
While doing that stellar work, but also having somebody that understands the importance of games, how to go ahead and lead through stuff and educate too. Just really amazing, Chris. So hats off to you, my friend. And before we jump out of here, make sure you go ahead and check out all the work that Chris has done at pbfstudios.com. Pie for breakfast, right? Just make sure we say it that way going forward. Chris, thank you so much for spending time with us on this episode of Rewind. We really appreciate it. Isn't that right, everybody? Yay! Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been an honor.
Awesome, buddy. All right. And for those of you that want to learn more about game development, if you are a AAA developer or an indie developer, make sure you head on over to aws.amazon.com/GameTech to discover all of the tools, technologies, and offerings that AWS can provide you on your cloud game development journey. And of course, a special shout out to Waterflame for the use of his music here on Rewind, and of course, all the other programming that I do on the AWS GameTech channels. And finally, if you care about the history of video games as much as I do, make sure you head on over to the Video Game History Foundation website at gamehistory.org. I'm a founding board member of this 501c3 organization, and they're doing incredible work to go ahead and preserve video games for future generations. Head on over there and check them out. And with that, that brings us to the end of another episode of Rewind. Thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with me. Make sure that you head on over to the links that are in the description below to check out the amazing work that's being done by Chris and the team over at Pie for Breakfast. Have an awesome rest of your day, an incredible weekend, and we'll see you next time on Rewind.